Hello everyone, I want to say a massive thank you to Nature's Temper, the other narrator you can hear in this video. He has a great narrating voice and really brings the stories to life, so make sure you go and check out his channel and the other parts of the story that he uploaded in his videos. I'll leave the links in the descriptions. I hope you're all having a great day and enjoyed these stories. And also make sure you check out the Insomniak podcast on iTunes. The link's in the description. I love you all and enjoy these stories.
There was something about her. The fact that she was just too nice. To everyone. But that wasn't how she was when she was alone. And do I know this? I watched her. You may think that's pretty creepy, but I don't care. I needed to know what was wrong with her. Everybody could tell how fake she was. And no one dared to investigate. Of course not. She was scary as hell. So anyways, this all started a week and a half after she moved to our school from... what was it she said? California. She moved to Maine from California. As I was saying, when she first moved here, everybody loved her. She's pretty, nice, and everything that makes up the typical popular girl. Another thing that struck me as unusual was that she came right in at the middle of our senior year. I know if my parents ever made me do that, well, it wouldn't work out well for them, to put it one way. Anywho, after about a week, people started noticing things. She noticed that they noticed. She started to try extra hard to fit in, to kiss ass, to make friends and keep them. The problem was, people were starting to fear her. The chill would run down my spine if she even walked by me in the hallway. This was when I started to become interested. One day I decided to follow her home. On her way, I lagged behind, most of the time looking down at my phone, trying not to be obvious. She did look back once. That's when I began to worry. When I looked up from my phone, she'd stopped. She just stood there, facing away. I knew what she was doing. She was waiting. She wanted to figure out for sure if I was following her. So I kneeled down to tie my shoe. My paranoia seemed to be for nothing when I looked closer to see she was on her phone. I felt so stupid. Alright, had to have been about an hour by now. Where the hell was she going? This walk had to be at least a mile or two long. We weren't even close to any neighborhood or any houses for that matter. We finally arrived to her house. It was so far out that it was hard for me to believe that she could find a way back here. Maybe she was on the phone, talking to someone with directions. I hid behind a tree as she let herself into this eerie house, and just watched her. I was worried and paranoid beyond belief by this point. I always listened to my gut. It didn't sound good. I was definitely scared. When I was sure she was in, I made my way slowly over to the house and peeked into the window. What I saw was something I would never forget. She was just sitting there in a small room, with just one single dirty stained mattress in her bra and underwear, smashing her head against the wall for a good 5 to 10 minutes. I wanted to run, but I couldn't look away. When she stopped, she started to sob quietly, then louder and louder, yelling things at herself like, "Stupid, stupid, stupid girl," or, "They know. They all know. Get rid of him." I was confused, frightened, yet still so curious. I should have known to leave now, but I just couldn't bring myself away from it. And she said, "Leave. Leave. Leave. Leave now!" Then she looked up. She stared me dead in the eyes, her eyes so black and hollow and evil. I snapped out of it and ran. It was hard to find my way out of the woods, but I just kept running. I didn't sleep for weeks. Every night I would see her cold, dark eyes in my window, just as I looked in hers. I still don't know if she's really there. When I went back to school, there was no sign of her anywhere. I was relieved, but still very confused. I didn't tell anyone. I never will. All I can do is document it. Hope someone else will see it and think twice before you feel the need to investigate the weird kid. Curiosity killed the cat.
I've been a security guard in my company for over 2 years now, but the work my company does is not your typical run-of-the-mill work. To put it simply, my company accepts jobs which no other security company will, including high-risk assignments that often result in death. Let me take it from the top. When I started working here, they had a very long one-on-one with me explaining all the potential dangers I'm facing. They also made me sign an NDA and a bunch of other papers stating that if something were to happen to me, the company is not responsible. They explained that the job is risky but well paid. I had been jobless for a while, so jump at the opportunity regardless of the risks. Unlike most other companies though, they made me read through the entire NDA aloud to make sure that I'm aware of all the rules. Some of the things that I read there made me think initially that it's a joke, but then I see my superior was dead serious. My job would basically be to provide support to the guards at other posts via comms and patrol the perimeter I'm stationed at. Now my headquarters was located in an office building compound which had multiple companies renting the adjacent buildings. I would mostly work nights, with the occasional mornings, and the rules as follows. I was to do a full sweep of the compound and all offices, save for Building 4, the call centre. I was not to approach Building 4 under any circumstances, no matter what I hear from outside. Even if I saw someone inside from the windows, I do not engage them. When I ask for more details, they don't answer me, saying, if I value my life, then I must obey. Now people work a normal 9 to 5 in that building, and nothing seems to be wrong during the day. When I ask the employees about it during my morning shifts, so they don't want to know me. For Building 6, the designer company, the rules are even stranger. Here's what the building chief tells me. In Building 6, you may run into someone, a woman to be precise. She's going to try and start a conversation with you, and it's imperative to ignore her at all costs. She's going to try and talk to you, taunt you, but she'll never get in your way. It's an extremely important rule to remember, and I cannot stress this enough. If you see her in the building, don't run. Finish your sweep. Trust me, she'll know. Do the sweep as you normally do. Check every room and quietly exit. Ignore her the entire way. She's going to become increasingly agitated and violent. Tell you something's behind you. Ignore her, unless you want to end up like the last guard, okay? You'll be fine. Now I've since encountered the woman, and it was a grueling and agonizing experience I don't want to speak about. Another rule I had to remember was not to open the gate between the hours of 22 and 07. The chief said that under no circumstances am I to open the gate. Even if the next guard comes 5 minutes earlier to relieve my duty, it remains shut. That brings me to this experience I had. It was about 6 months after I started working and the sun's already up. I heard knocking on the gate and went out. I saw through the gate the silhouette of my co-worker. "Hey, mind opening the gate," he said. As I approach and put my keys into the hole, my phone starts ringing. I answer it without looking, but when I heard the voice, my blood froze. It's my co-worker. "Hey man, I'm gonna be 30 minutes late today, sorry," and hung up. I realise it's 6:50 AM. I stare at the silhouette on the other side of the gate, who suddenly starts banging on the door, demanding to be let in, stating he lost his cell phone and he was the real co-worker. I now retreat to the guardhouse and wait for what feels like forever, when this banging suddenly starts on the door, demanding to be let in, stating that he lost his cell phone and he was a real co-worker. I retreat to the guardhouse and wait for what seems like forever until it stops. In reality, it only lasted until 7 AM. Those were all the rules I had to follow on my own post, and most of the time it's uneventful. However, I have heard stories from other co-workers. Since I'm in contact with guards at other posts, one of them told me his story. He worked as a guard in a residential building, and one night an old man who lived there called him to come to his apartment. He didn't explain what's wrong, just said go there, so he did. When he reached the apartment, his wife was crying, stating that her husband's dead. The guard tried convincing her that her man was very much alive and had in fact brought him there, but when he turned around, the old man's gone. It was then that he saw the old man's dead body in the chair, near his sobbing wife. He quit the same night. Another creepy thing that happened was on the farmstead which our company has guards on. A guy by the name of Jeff who worked there told me about his own experience which made him run away from his post in the middle of the night. So apparently, the farm was empty at that time since it needed some more staff built first. But his duty was to basically patrol circles around the farm, making sure there's no squatters or vandals. So one night, as he's walking around, he hears someone calling his name in a playful tone. He dismisses it as his imagination at first, but when it reoccurs, he asks who's there, demanding they put their hands in the air. Now I haven't seen this, so I can't guarantee anything, but Jeff says that all of a sudden, a man suddenly rises from the crops, and they just reach his waist, which is technically impossible, because the crops themselves are taller than Jeff, who's pretty tall. But the man grins at Jeff and continues calling his name playfully, as though he's still hiding from him. Needless to say, Jeff didn't exactly stick around to see what the fuss was about. When he reports it to HQ, they said there's sightings of him in the past, always calling out names, but never really doing much harmful. The final thing I'll share with you here is my experience when I was stationed at a post hospital for a month. It was a private clinic. Now my job was basically to monitor the camera feed. Camera 3 was cut off, though I have no idea why. I asked them and they told me to keep it that way and to never turn it on again. They also said that from time to time I may see a person on feed which covered the outside of the security office, and that he would just be standing there facing the door. I was to remain in my office, whatever happened, and never glance at the door. He would usually disappear after 30 minutes or so. Patrolling was strictly forbidden between 3 to 6 AM. Money is one of the reasons I haven't quit so far, and the dangers aren't that bad if you get used to it and know what you're doing. And plus getting stationed at different posts keeps this job adventurous and dynamic. But I still have no explanation to any of these things to this day. I just pray I'm not clumsy enough to ever find out what's the worst that can come of them. I guess you'll never hear from me if that happens anyway.
There's someone standing at the foot of my bed. Every night for the past week, as my eyelids grow heavy and I slip into unconsciousness, he comes out, his hands grasping the metal railing, rising 1 inch at a time. He peeks out his head first, black and featureless, a pair of cobalt blue eyes set high up where his eyebrows should be. Then out comes his shoulders, and his chest, until he's fully upright. He looks like a store mannequin, sexless, starved. I know I'm sleeping, but my eyes are open and I see him. But I can't bring myself to talk to him or reach out to him. The gaunt man just stands there, his eyes transfixed to mine, his breathing shallow and ragged. On Monday, the gaunt man reached out a thin hand with long fingers and pulls back the sheets covering my legs. He drags his fingers across my heels or up the soles of my feet, leaving long trails of red that stain my sheets. It felt like a nightmare, the kind you can't wake yourself out of. Tuesday, I caught a glimpse of him in my bedroom mirror. His back was the same as his front. His cobalt blue eyes found mine in the dark room and just watched me as I slept. He dragged his fingers across my legs all the way down to my toenails, scratching them. There's always pain in the morning. There's blood on the sheets, scabs on my legs. He loves mirrors, I know this. He likes to look at himself. When he comes out from under the bed, Wednesday, he just stood and stared at his own reflection as if he were in love with it. His front, though. His front stayed fixed at me. Thursday, his eyes moved, shifted across his face until they were at just the right place. When this was done, he crawled into the bed beneath the covers and lay beside me. The way he felt when my hand brushed his skin, it made me think of rotten shellfish in a freezer drawer. Friday morning he was gone. My feet were a bloody mess. Just trying to stand up felt like a dozen needles running through the soles of my feet. I saw him in the puddle I made on the floor. Don't ask me how I could tell, but he looked like he was smiling. I went to see a doctor about it. He sent me to see a shrink. I've showered 3 times already, but I still smell like rotten shellfish. Friday night, he was leaning over me as I slept. He looks proper now, bit round in the waist, same as me. Saturday morning, I missed the appointment with the shrink. It's hard to type now that he's in my monitor's reflection. He's dragging his fingers across the back of my hands, up my arms, all the way to my shoulders. I can't see the letters that well for the blood. My eyes are all wrong. He's fading now, but from the creaking of the floorboards in the next room, I know he's in the bed. Don't ask me how I know this, but it's his bed now. He'll be in my rearview mirror. Come Monday, I'll be the one standing behind him as he looks at his reflection in the bathroom stalls. I look at my reflection. My eyes are cobalt blue.
Now this is a personal family story that's never been shared before, but I can't keep it in, it's just too crazy. I mean, so there's been this doll that's been in our family for apparently hundreds of years, but I don't believe that. The thing's got to have been about 100 years old. Now apparently, that doll is haunted by some of the natives that used to live on the land that my family owns. Get this, the story of how they found it is that my grandpa woke up in the night with this urge just to go digging. Never had anything like it before. Literally in the middle of the night, grabs his shovel, and he says that there was almost a voice guiding him there, but it wasn't speaking to him, if that makes sense. He just knew what it meant. So he grabs his shovel and heads out in the dark, with only the moonlight guiding him and the voice. He starts digging away. My nan thinks he's gone crazy. However, he eventually strikes something. We can then see that he struck a box, and what's inside the box? You guessed it, the doll. Now apparently, when he started looking at the doll, he realised something was wrong with it, and immediately dropped it. He ran inside and went to bed again, hoping that maybe, just maybe, it was all a dream. My nan was furious at him for doing so, being a very strong believer in the paranormal. Unfortunately for him, it wasn't a dream, and he woke up the next day with it sitting in the living room. Both of my grandparents were sure that each other had put it there, and didn't say anything about it. Now that's where I come into the story. Apparently, I would wake up when I slept round there, and I would complain of it screaming at me whenever I made eye contact with it. What's worse is my other siblings also reported the same thing, but for some reason my grandpa had an urge that he had to protect it and couldn't get rid of it. That all changed, however, one day when my mum was having tea with them in the living room, when she caught eye contact with the doll, and she heard the screaming too. It's like a faint voice in the back of your head that slowly gets louder. That was it. She's had enough of it messing with her children, and my grandpa, for some godforsaken reason, protecting it. She heads outside with simply a lighter and some sticks. She throws it onto a fire and burns it. She then buried the ashes, and years later we sold the home. Now I don't know if that thing's still there, or whether it's actually returned again to haunt the new owners of the home. I know one thing though, I'm glad that my mum was brave enough to deal with it, and that I don't ever have to see that godforsaken doll again or hear the screaming. So by this point, everyone is in no doubt to be fully aware of the Area 51 memes and all the hubbub surrounding them. Apparently, over 1 million people are set to storm the perimeter on September 20th of this year. Should be interesting, but let's be honest for a second. I doubt it's gonna happen. Even if we did, even if by some ridiculous miracle they managed to overwhelm the most powerful military on Earth and infiltrate a top secret base, I don't think they'd be exactly thrilled with the results. I'll just come right out and say I guess Area 51's a red herring. It's a distraction, and pretty much always has been. Nothing out there but sand, reclusive scientists and an old lake. I mean, think about it. If Area 51 is one of the most top secret and covert blacklists in the world, how does everyone know about it? How secret can it be if everyone knows the secret? I mean, for frick's sake, even Obama acknowledges its existence. That's the whole point of it. They want you distracted so you don't look for the others. But why take my word for it? Who am I? I'm just some pleb on the internet that decided to cash in on a trend for some clout perhaps, yeah. But no. That may be who I am now, but I was once a person of particular interest to the United States government. Most people know me as Mr. Blue. It's not my real name, but it's much easier to pronounce. I used to be a pilot. I did that for many years, and I loved every second of it. I tell ya, There's nothing quite like soaring through the skies and breaking the sound barrier for the first time. Yeah, you might crap yourself a little, but hey, that's part of the experience, really. Now, unfortunately, the type of work I did is above the top secret, and for all of our safeties, I cannot go into any more detail of who I am or what I did. One day, however, I was out on a classified reconnaissance mission in a certain area I should not have been. Now, I'll apologise here for any vague details of certain things, but you gotta understand, the things I'm about to tell you are beyond top secret. I mean, they'd kill me 10 times over for uttering a word of it. But anyway, the mission's going as planned, when suddenly my instruments start going haywire. Air pressure inside the cabin just plummeted, and the speed and fuel consumption gauges start going crazy. Everything. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Next thing I know, I see a bright light soar past me at an ungodly speed. The shockwave it produced is so violent that it shredded the whole of my craft in a split second. So I went from casually flying along to suddenly regaining consciousness as I plummeted headfirst towards the ground at terminal velocity. I managed to pull my chute before I splattered, but as I touched down, I almost wished I hadn't. There I was met by an entourage of at least 24 men in winter camo suits and masks. They're all pointing weapons at me and screamed in a language which I recognise as English. I do my best to calm down and appear unthreatening, but that didn't stop them from wrenching me into a pair of handcuffs and hauling me onto their APCs. They began to drive away, and the real severity of the situation hit me. I was not going to be saved. The people I worked for had never said it, but I always known that if you're captured, you're on your own. With that in mind, I had no real incentive to keep my mouth shut once they started the interrogation. It may seem cowardly, but I'm not about to be tortured brutally from a former ally. Yeah, the government says that they don't torture people, but that's what they say. So I told them about who I worked for, what my mission was, why I grew up, all that jazz. It was all fabricated, but they took the bait regardless, thanks to their severe distrust of the Russians at the time. But they were actually pretty cool after that. I mean, they wouldn't leave me in their custody alone, but it was better I was alive than dead for them. They then transported me away from my initial interrogation place into a secure facility nearby. I was blindfolded the whole time. I can now hear rumbling of multiple vehicles, sounds of doors sliding, and the distinct feeling of my stomach dropping. I could tell they've taken me somewhere deep underground. Soon after, I stepped off the elevator and they removed my blindfold. Their leader was a guy with a stern face, a thick black beard and eyes that looked etched onto concrete. He wore a black suit, with some symbol upon his heart pocket that I don't recognise. He stepped in front of everyone, outstretched his arms while staring at me. "Welcome to your new home." An ever so slight grin stretches across his face as he says it. I glanced down the dismay grey hallways which seemed stretched out further than I could ever imagine in multiple directions. They led me down some hall on the right, past dozens of locked corridors, and the rooms before ushering me into a cell. My handcuffs were removed soon after, and the door slid shut behind me. The same man who had welcomed me to the facility then approaches the window, pushing the intercom. "Welcome to the corporation, Mr. Blue. I don't believe there's any reason why our time spent together should be unfriendly. I apologize for this, but you must realize that this is a necessary precaution we must take." And I nod at him. "Wonderful. We'll see you for dinner soon." If you require anything, just please notify one of the guards outside of your quarters." And with that, he and his little entourage turned and strolled down the hallway. That was my very first night in the facility, which I eventually came to know as FEZ. I don't think it's an official name, but I heard several personnel at the base refer to that by the acronym over the years. I still don't know what it was for. The best I can come up with is Fortified Experimental Zone. It makes the most sense. All things considered, at first it wasn't actually too bad. The staff are nice, the food is great, and there's plenty of things to see around the base. Now, they interviewed me probably 100 times after, and were especially interested in the craft I was piloting. The craft in question was one of our new technologies, but unfortunately it was blew to smithereens via the light. It took years of incarceration there, but eventually the staff came to trust me almost as much as they did their own comrades. We would laugh and joke with one another, and soon we might even be considered friends. I became especially close with one of the scientists named Kevin. Kevin was a smart, comical guy and had quite a lot of things explained to me. He and I would spend countless hours talking. He was my only glimpse into what was happening on the outside world. He'd bring in books and movies for us to enjoy together. He'd keep me updated on everything. And over the next 30 years, we'd develop a close friendship that I always treasure. I must have displayed some kind of intellectual potential, because they eventually started asking for my input on various curiosities stationed throughout the base. They only did it because I'd sworn to them complete loyalty that I'd never be allowed to leave the base anyway. The base itself is colossal. They always blindfolded me during transports via any location, but one time I caught a glimpse of the buttons in the elevator. There had to be at least 50 of them. I remember the first time they showed me one of the lockdown blocks. There were guard posts at every cell. I heard some very strange noises emanating around me as we transversed the halls. I thought for sure that they were about to show me some horrendous beast from the depths of hell, and prepared myself for the according howls of unseen things through the halls. Now, the lead scientist rolled back a two-way mirror, and my heart frozen with anticipation. In the cell block in front of us, there's nothing more than a human girl in a grey jumpsuit. She's maybe 5 years old or so, but nothing out of the ordinary. I told the doctor what's going on, and he raises his eyebrows before pressing a button, and I heard the sound of a gas seep into the room. A few tense seconds passed, when the girl suddenly shrieked a little. Her head tilted back, and I saw jagged, needle-like teeth emerge from her mouth. Her jet black eyes then lurched towards us, and she lunges at the window. She struck it hard and fell into the ground, snarling and hissing like some terrible beast. You ever seen anything like that? All I can do is shake my head. I've never seen anything like it before. They found her in the woods outside of Whitehorse with a freshly disemboweled man. She was eating him, and she appeared unaffected by the sub-zero temperatures. I suddenly feel like vomiting, but I said nothing. I only stared back at the unusually gruesome little girl. What the hell is she? Unfortunately, I was never told anything else about her. I doubt the personnel knew much anyways. They came to show me a lot of very strange things over the years. A giant brownish orange-haired primate that walked upright and seemed to respond to facial movements. A humanoid-shaped being that was only detectable via infrared cameras. A golden chest that would instantly kill anything that touched it, and a 10-foot tall creature wrapped in vines that emitted bouts of radiation and blended into the environment with perfect camo. There's a monstrous fish, at least 80 feet in length, frozen in nitrogen. Various apparent creatures that I'm guessing are the results of relentless genetic tempering. I've never seen anything like it. All of the monsteries housed there, and the secrets buried in their possession. They also asked for my advice on certain paradoxical phenomenon that had plagued them as well. They tell me that for decades there had been hundreds of unsolved cases of human disappearances that defied all explanations. Young children were found on cliff edges that they could not have reached, while old and frail people would be discovered dozens of miles away from where they started only hours later. Many not found though. I could almost see the fear from their eyes as they relay case after case of recordings and other things. And it was clear, although not said, that they have no idea what the cause is. Unfortunately, neither do I, as it was the first time I'd ever heard of the bizarre phenomenon. I told them honestly that I didn't believe my former allies were responsible, but I don't know if that made them feel worse or not. Throughout the years there, I had always found one particular thing weird. After all the weird and terrifying things they showed me, there's never a mention of extraterrestrials. That's why everyone thinks these black site facilities are there, but nobody mentioned it. That made me smile a bit when I thought about it, because they had no idea how close they were. The closest thing they had was this weird tentacle creature with a rigid set of teeth in its mouth, almost an eel, but possessed for weird eyes in a ring around its head. You'd think it'd live in the water, but it didn't. That was what threw me off about it. It slithered around the ground in a very swift and very unsettling motion. They said its DNA resembled nothing like anything they've ever seen before, much like RNA, hence the reason they believed. But we're not certain of where it come from. Kevin and I got talking back in his quarters one night as the rest of the crew retired for the evening. He shared with me a bit of his brandy, and we were content to chat as though we're friends late into the night. He tells me about himself and things that he's never mentioned before. He showed me his wife and his son that had been taken from him. Kevin admitted that his son died in a car crash years back, and his wife unfortunately died of cancer years later. It broke my heart to hear that, and I felt sorrow for him some 30 years later. Kevin was in his early 50s, but you'd never know it with the enthusiasm in his voice. It was during the conversation Kevin ended up mentioning something I find interesting. He told me that he believed that if an alien species existed, they're advanced enough to traverse a galactic canopy and reach Earth. Then obviously they're going to be quite intelligent also. He said he didn't believe in any of the Hollywood depictions of doomsday where aliens come to destroy us. He thought they'd be more subtle than that. Think about it. You find some intelligent creatures which present almost no threat to you, and the first thing you're going to do is try and kill it? That'd be a waste, no. And no species that fancies themselves as an advanced being would be so brash. At least I hope they wouldn't. He chuckled slightly and shot me a knowing look mixed with a unique intrigue that glistened in his grey eyes. Even if they thought we were destroying our own planet or something, why do they care? They're trillions of miles away, and there's trillions of other planets in our Milky Way alone. They could pick off any one of them if they wanted resources. I chuckled to myself, almost foreseeing where the conversation's heading. "It's not the planets they're after," I replied. Kevin snapped and pointed his finger at me and his face lights up. "Exactly. They'd want to study us, learn about us, how we do other things." Kevin's hand moves erratically now. "They'd probably learn about us, then we'd learn more about ourselves too. I mean, granted, they'd have to be more intelligent. They could learn up close, understand how we work. No need for bloodshed when they could simply, inconspicuously integrate into human culture. They have no doubt mastered the art of altering their biology to disguise themselves. I mean, that's nothing when compared to the tech they use here, you know." He paused from his entranced monologue and wiped off the stream from his glasses. I just sit back, intent to let him continue. As I found it fascinating that he could know so much. Aliens, they're not warlords. They're poets, architects, authors, musicians, beings that wish to create. It is the ultimate calling from the entity so powerful. Kevin took a deep breath and revealed his own explanation. His speech had turned a bit slurred. His eyes are somewhat lazily floating. He then met his eyes in a look that I'd never seen him give before. It was as though he seemed to have lost all sense of formality and ready to propose a question which he had long wanted to ask. "You're not really from Russia, are you?" The sudden accusation caught me off guard. I don't know what to say. You had everyone fooled. I mean, I was too for the longest time. You had a suitable backstory, authentic accent, and the alias you gave us checked out. He paused and clasped his hands in front of him. "You look so authentic too, but there was one thing you missed. One thing you can't fake. That night your craft was shot down. What were you doing here, Kevin?" And I maintained a prolonged lock of eye contact before I finally responded. "Well, reconnaissance." And for the first time in decades, I dropped the Russian accent. It was clear that there was no longer any reason to lie to my friend. "And what did you see, Kevin?" Staring into my eyes. "Beauty, poetry, creatures like us." Kevin just stared at me for the longest time, as though he was there weighing my soul in his mind. I wondered what he planned. Eventually he smiled and rose to make his way to the cell door. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a black steel pistol with a long snout. "Mr. Blue, do you want to go home?" I nodded after pausing for a moment. "I hope your allies can forgive us." Without another word, he flashed his security badge on the locks on the doorway. He mentioned for me to rise and follow, so I do. Kevin glanced back and forth down the hallway, but due to the late hour, no one's around. He and I sprinted down the corridor and onwards to one of the security booths. He flashes his badge as I hid out of sight. He entered his room and I heard noises, like a brief scuffle before two bright flashes ended it. Kevin now re-emerges with wild eyes, beckoning to me to follow. He and I dash down the hallway and reach a massive mineshaft elevator soon after. Now finally, for the first time, I enter without a blindfold. Kevin punches in the security code and powers it up. Security system will be down for a good half hour, but automated distress beacons have already been activated, and that gives us about 8 minutes. Kevin drops the clip from his pistol, popping in a fresh one. I see speckles of blood on his eyes. He's in a frenzy state. "Here, take this." He reaches out his hand and held something which I haven't seen in decades. The old radio from my craft. I took it. We meet eyes at the door to the elevator. It was back to running after that, but after a few minutes of it, we've reached an underground parking facility. Kevin unlocks a nearby vehicle, and the two of us hopped in as he fires it up. The engine roars to life. Kevin and I accelerate through. A moment later, we exit the facility. God. And I see my first vision of the night sky in over 4 decades. There were men stationed at the perimeter gates attempting to stop us, but he don't even flinch. He crashes right through the fence on the perimeter, causing multiple lights to activate in our wake. I hear sirens now and the silhouettes of people dashing. There's a suit in the back, put it on. I do so, without question, and fit in the snug polyester garment. I covered every square inch of my neck around that thing, and it feels incredibly comfortable. There's a dial on your right side. You can use it to mask your body heat. They're gonna be after you. He tossed a map into my lap and continued barking instructions. You can contact your friends on that radio, right? His eyes flashed to me as he slid onto the main road and away from the compound. Yeah, Kevin nodded. Make your way north. They won't be expecting that. There's a river up there about 30 miles away from the forest. Once you find it, head east until you find a small town. Ask the guy at the post office for Mr. Wyatt. He's a friend of mine who's agreed to help you. He'll take it from there. I tried to digest the flow of information as best as I can to remain confident. It had all happened so suddenly. I stashed you some MREs in that bag. Should last you a good couple of weeks. Kevin then swerved around the corner to reorientate us onto a new dark road. I have an influx of adrenaline. A sudden thought occurred to me. What's gonna happen to you though? Kevin didn't seem to want to acknowledge the question. Forget about it. Just get back to your own people, okay? Behind us is a flurry of lights, suddenly ascending into the night sky. The whirly sound of rotary blades is all I can hear. Ah, I had hoped that I could get you a bit further than this. He suddenly slams on the brakes. My head lurches forward and the car spun back and forth along an icy road. Here, take this too. Handing over the long-barreled pistol. I hesitantly take it. Then our eyes meet for one final time. This is where we say goodbye, Mr. Blue. Why? Why are you doing this for me? Kevin lets out a sigh, staying silent for a moment, and only when the sounds of approaching engines grew louder, he says, You don't belong here. You don't belong in a cage. I don't know where you come from, but I want you to see your loved ones again. I know I can't. His eyes begin to water as he jolted his neck before looking at me one final time. I hope you don't think of us as captors or kidnappers. I hope you see us as you see yourself. I hope you can just understand. A single tear then rolled down his cheeks and I put my hand on his shoulder. I always have and I always will. Thank you, Kevin. I held out my hand and he grabbed it tight as we shared one final moment before I venture into the blizzard. The journey from then on was long and arduous, with me spending weeks trudging through snow and frozen forests. Hounds, men, machines pursue me for days, but somehow I elude them. The terrain is truly brutal, unrelenting, but eventually I managed to find the river which Kevin has mentioned to me. By this point, all of my pursuers had long gone silent, and I followed the river and found the town, and soon after, the man known as Mr. Wyatt. He was a kind man, gladly inviting me into his house to avoid the agents. It is there that I've been ever since, awaiting Ali's arrival. They were stunned to hear me again, but not as stunned as I was to find out the radio still works. They weren't entirely sure whether they could trust me anymore, but I didn't give them a choice. I threatened to go public and expose them to the world, and they finally agree, but mention it's months before they can reach me. I expect as much, and thankfully Mr. White allowed me to stay with him and wait for their arrival. I found out soon that my dear friend Kevin, to whom I owe my life and freedom, has been found deceased. The authorities ruled it a suicide, gunshot wounds around the back of the head, but obviously I had my doubts. It truly broke me to learn about one of my true friend's demises, but I knew it was what he expected. I like to think that this is why he chose to do it, and furthermore, it is the reason I'm posting here now. Kevin's legacy deserves to live on, and this is the only way I know how to do it. And with that, we have come full circle to this message you're reading right now, to address the original topic. Area 51 is indeed a reuse. Kevin had a lot of power in his previous role and told me about all the operations. The real prize is FEZ, my former prison, somewhere in Alaska, buried beneath mountains of snow. Kevin was a smart, brilliant man. If you've ever managed to make it this far, then I'd like you to think that you're someone like him, brave, curious, with an almost innate sense of wonder that cannot be satisfied. It is my hope that Kevin's ideas will live on through you. My allies would never approve of the message, but that's not the point. The truth is something that all sentient beings should be allowed to perceive, despite how unpleasant it may be. It was Kevin's belief that the beings he knows as aliens are already there, that instead of murdering humans, as is often portrayed in stories, they would blend in, take keen interest in human culture and society, write books and poetry in the hopes of connecting to something truly extraordinary. If Kevin is right, then maybe one day you even stumble upon such a story yourself. Maybe you'll think that it's nothing more than a work of fiction either. Maybe the author said theoretical story would seem like nothing more than your run-of-the-mill internet user. He probably wouldn't come right out and say it, because that would be entirely too corny. He would probably just leave you the pieces and hope you can put them together. Maybe you are truly like Kevin, drawn to mystery and prepared to entertain the fantastic. Maybe you'll dismiss the implications of the words before you because you don't dare believe in something so outlandish. Because in the end, truth is not the problem, belief is. Maybe someone will understand who, or more importantly, what I really am. Maybe it will be you. Either way, I've been away for a very long time. It's time for me to go home now. Thank you, Kevin. I will always uphold our agreement.